it's now time to do some poems from Pir Sultan Abdal. And also to talk about Pir Sultan Abdal in general. Essentially, it's like a conversation he's having in this poem. He's having a conversation with his instrument.
Gel benim sarı tamburam, sen ne için inilersin? İçim, oyuk, derdim, büyük, ben onun için inilerim.
When we talk about the Bağlama, how it's our stringed Quran, that's the phrase that everybody remembers. But there's something else about the Bağlama here that sort of Pir Sultan is hinting at and discussing. When he says Sarı Tamburam, he's referring to the instrument that we play in a different name and for a different style than, say, the one I have here or the one behind me. These instruments they have slightly different names technically to a tanbur or a tanbur, which comes from Iran. But ultimately, Pir Sultan's aim here is to talk about the role that this instrument has in the Alevi faith. It's changed forms as, I guess, technologies have developed, as musicians have wanted to hear new sounds. So they've added more strings, they've made the neck longer, they've changed the thickness of the strings, they've changed what the strings have been made from. But that's just to add some harmonic, aesthetic sort of beauty to the music. It's the same instrument that's key to our music and our progression, if you like, or the passing on of the Alevi faith. So Pir Sultan here is talking about the tanbur.
Koluma taktılar teli, söylettiler bin bir dili. Oldum Ayn-ı, bülbülü, ben onun için inilerim. Koluma taktılar perde, uğrattılar bin bir derde. Ayn-ı gecesi nerde, ben onun için inilerim, yar onun için inilerim.
And I guess this is a nice little metaphor of the fact that these instruments, in comparison to a classical Western guitar, they have a very large space in their interior, right? And here he's saying, well, the space inside of this, the reason it's been carved out is to hold all these problems that we have. It's to store all the problems and the problems that are associated and that are answered by our faith. The tanbur classically is slightly smaller, so it can store less problems. But I guess in parallel with how society is developed and capitalism is great at increasing our problems, the instruments have increased in size in terms of their base here, and so they can store more of that problem. He's making the analogy of the tanbur being an arm. It's an extension of your body. It's another limb. But also we shouldn't take inilerim, that phrase, as a negative thing. It's just a means of expression. It's just a means of expressing some emotion, some feeling, some thoughts. This instrument is acting to get across a particular philosophy, a particular view of the world. And in this sense, the view and the philosophical position taken by Alevis is of understanding difficulty and hardship. Now, that's not always going to be the case, as in, you can be very philosophical and your philosophy can be focused on the opposite of being incredibly happy. So in ancient Greece, you had a lot of different philosophical movements that were focused on enjoying the pleasures of life. So famously, Epicurus was a big advocate of this. Later, in sort of even in the Roman Empire, the cult of Dionysus becomes very famous, and these are based on philosophers who advocated for humans enjoying all the worldly pleasures. Humans doing whatever it is just to enjoy themselves, and that is where true meaning can be derived, essentially, is what they're saying. But on the other hand, you have philosophers that are focused on the opposite side, in a sense, of realizing that it's through hardship, through struggle, that we can in some way understand the world, and we have to put ourselves through this struggle and through this pain, and that's fine, and that's okay. Ancient Greek philosophy had a lot of stuff within it, and the Arabs that then took that information and kept it alive while Europe was burning itself down. Those philosophers, they focused on struggle to life and trying to stay alive, and that's going to be reflected in our practices. So a lot of Sufis in their practices would, in quotation marks, torture themselves, right? So a very nice example I can go to is that of Yunus Emre. When he goes onto his path, he goes to a particular tekke, and there he spends 6-7 years given the one single task of every day going out into the forest and finding pieces of wood to then be burnt within the lodge. But pieces of wood that were straight, perfectly aligned and nothing wrong with them. And this is of course quite a torturous of him because he'd spend hours having to do this. And he did this for 6-7 years, right? So this idea of çile çekmek, and in particular when you go to places like Hacı Bektaş, you'll have a room that is called the çilehane. And that is the place where you go through this pain in some sense. I don't, again, see this as pain as something to avoid, but it's pain as something to explore. We have a very famous phrase when it comes to taking on all this sorrow, all this pain, and using it. Ölmeden evvel ölmek, or it's also called fena fillah. It's in Arabic. It has some roots in Arabic, is a key part of the Alevi philosophy as well. Taking on and understanding and in some way accepting this pain is achieving this goal. You know, this goes back to this that I mentioned before, the story of Sisyphus, right? You're in and stuck in a life where this is the reality. So the question is, how do you come to in some way understand this? Not accept, but understand, and that is enough. And that once you understand that, you can actually start to sort of smile, because this is you in some way understanding the truth, in a sense, is a reality that cannot be avoided. And to wail is therefore not a negative thing. And then so what's interesting about the poem, the tanbur answers, and then it gets to a verse where Pir Sultan goes,
Gel benim sarı tamburam, efendim, tabibim, cananım, yar, yar, yar, yar, yar. Gel benim sarı tamburam, dizler üstünde yatıram, yine kırıldı hatıram, ben onun için, yar onun için.
You know, this is him sort of accepting now what the tanbur is saying of all this pain. Okay, I accept it. Now let me express it as well. So that in the final verse, essentially what Pir Sultan does is he combines himself and the tanbur.
Sarı tamburadır adım, göklere akar feryadım, Pir Sultan'ımdır üstadım, ben onun için, yar onun için. Pir Sultan'ımdır üstadım.
Him and the tanbur have now become one, and he's saying, well, my name is actually Sarı Tamburam, and my name is Pir Sultan. This is my thing to leave in the world. This is my message left to the skies, to the universe, and that's why I continue to wail. There's an object in maths which has a finite volumes but infinite size, and that's kind of like what this is. Even though it looks like it's finite, it can fill up infinitely, and it's filling up with the words and the sayings of people that come and go and play this instrument. Each poet that's come one after the other adds an extra drop that matters for the ocean, to this path, to this extension of ourselves. And that's really what it becomes. It becomes another limb. It becomes a representation of our path.
What would your yellow tambura say? The one that's on your lap?
It would definitely wail. And I think that comes across when I play and sing. Because this is the advantage of not being a musician, is that I can play and sing without care for technique and technicality. I care enough to every now and then sing at the correct note. Otherwise, what's coming out is unfiltered. What's being heard is an amalgamation of my thoughts in some way, somehow distilled into my voice. Just from a musical perspective, just to learn how to play the instrument, you'll be given examples of songs, of poetry by other people. What that really means is you're picking up the instrument and you're playing somebody else's song. I guess the way to understand the final unity of the instrument and the musician is when you start singing your own song.
Sarı tamburadır adım, efendim, tabibim, cananım, yar, yar, yar, yar, yar. Sarı tamburadır adım, göklere akar feryadım, Pir Sultan'ımdır üstadım, ben onun için, yar onun için. Pir Sultan'ımdır üstadım, ben onun için inilerim, yar onun için inilerim.